All right, so this is the March 2019 written language section, and we're just going to go through some of these questions. We're not going to read all the paragraph unless we come up to a question that asks us for an introduction or a conclusion. We're just going to kind of hit the questions one by one. So starting with this one, looks like we're going to start all the way at the top. Polyester packing peanuts, thousands of them. That's what surround members of a Purdue University research team led by chemical engineering professor Vilas G. Pohl after they had finished unpacking new equipment for a laboratory facility. Packing peanuts are a standard part of shipments as their cushiony material ensures that items such as glassware. Okay, so right now this is offering us a comma right here. Ensures items such as glassware. So they are a standard part of shipping, because their cushiony material ensures that items are not damaged in transit. So such as glassware is acting as a prepositional phrase here, and that does work. Let's see if we can disprove the others. As their cushiony material ensures that items that are shipped, okay, that would be redundant to this standard part of shipment, so we can get rid of that. Which are commonly used because their cushiony material ensures. Okay, so commonly used is also redundant to standard part. And guarantees and ensures is redundant to itself, so it is A. Now, if you notice, these are all very similar answer choices. A just happens to be shorter, so this is a concision or a redundancy question. You're going to notice that as you see answer choices like this, you can often choose the shortest one as long as it does not introduce any new grammatical errors. So keep that in mind as you're navigating the test. Okay, which choice best sets up the information that follows in the next paragraph? So the next paragraph says, Pohl and his team determined that the peanuts were composed of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They knew that reusable lithium-ion batteries, which are commonly used to power electronic devices, employ anodes made of carbon. A battery's anode attracts and stores ions, atoms bearing an electrical charge, when the battery is charging and releases the ions to generate electricity. Okay, so we want something that introduces this idea of all the chemical components and how these batteries work. Thus, more curbside recycling services should consider accepting packing peanuts. Okay, that seems like a little bit of a stretch. Let's see what else we have. Hence, many environmental scientists have sought to address the waste management problems. That wraps up the previous paragraph, but I don't know that it introduces the next one. As a result, the abundance of packing peanuts in today's landfills is cause for alarm. That's true, but it has nothing to do with either paragraph. Instead, they resolved to use their chemical expertise to devise a solution. Okay, so this introduces chemical expertise and a solution, which is ion batteries. So it looks like D is going to be our answer choice. All right, number 3. So it looks like this is going to be a modifier question, so let's take a look. By heating the peanuts in a catalyst to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for several hours in the presence of argon. Okay, so we have to ask ourselves, who is doing the heating? The carbon was not doing the heating, so we can get rid of A. Pohl and his team, they were doing the heating. The resulting chemical action was not, and the isolation of the carbon was not. So by heating this, Pohl and his team were able to isolate it. You want to make sure that your modifier is touching what it is modifying. All right, number 4. Further heating resulted in extremely thin microsheets of carbon. All right, so that is a complete sentence, and then we have a comma. That could be made into battery anodes. Okay, that's also a complete sentence, so we have to get rid of this word that. We can't get rid of the word that because it's not underlined, so we have to change this in order to balance these two complete sentences. So we know... So looking at this, it looks like this is actually acting as one sentence. So further heating resulted in extremely thin microsheets of carbon that could be made into battery anodes. So this is an example of one phrase that they're trying to force punctuation into, but the punctuation is not needed. So the answer choice here is actually just C. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 5, which choice best sets up the main topics of the paragraph? The vaporization process that separates the carbon from the hydrogen and oxygen left the surfaces of the carbon microsheets uneven and porous. According to Pohl, openings in the surface made the anode's absorption of ions more efficient. Okay, and then we have this transition. The battery's charged faster. Okay, so if they're more efficient and they're charging faster, then that's not an oppositional, so we can get rid of A. It's not a similarity. One thing is causing the other, so it could be as a result. And then by the same token is the same thing as likewise. So 6 is C. In addition, the anodes retained about 13% more of what? So of them and of these is very similar, but we need to know of what. And then we do know that 50% of the time the delete option is correct, but I feel like if we just deleted this, something would be missing. And so we're going to have to go with ions. Number 8. Then conventional anodes, which meant. Okay, so we have this which meant that the batteries could provide more electricity. That seems like an incomplete phrase that's coming after a complete. So we probably do need some punctuation here. But what they're offering us, that's a semicolon. That can only separate complete from incomplete. And this meant, so that would need a comma between anodes and the conjunction. And then this comma, separating from a complete sentence, doesn't have a fanboy, so it can't be that. So in this situation, they're actually not using punctuation at all. And that's fine, because we can disprove all of these. All right, so now we have to go back to this setting up the main topic of the paragraph. So it looks like the main topic of the paragraph was the process and how it being more porous made it more efficient. The anodes retained more ions than do conventional anodes, so they could provide more electricity. All right, so further research will be necessary to determine all the potential applications. No, this is a specific application. The team presented its findings at the American Chemical Society's 2015 meeting. They haven't mentioned this meeting, so it would be weird to introduce this and then not talk about it again. The anodes of conventional lithium-ion batteries are usually made from graphite. That seems like a detail that is unnecessary to this part of the passage. So the anodes produced by Pohl and his team proved remarkably effective. And then we learn all the ways that they're effective. So it is D. All right, number 9. The process as for recycling, so this is just going to be an idiom. So how do we say this? The process of recycling, that's not available. The process for recycling would be another choice, and look, it's right here. Okay, so this is a diction question. We have all these different ways of saying similar things. So let's look. It requires less time and energy than the humdrum method. So humdrum is kind of a colloquialism. It doesn't really belong in a science piece. And it sounds like they're trying to say like the normal way. So exemplary would be an exceptional way or the exact specific way of doing it. So that doesn't work. Standard does work. Run-of-the-mill is kind of similar to humdrum in that it doesn't fit the tone of the passage. So it's going to be C here. And then which choice provides the most effective conclusion for the passage as a whole? This additional benefit attests to the future promise of the work being done in Pohl's lab. In fact, the process that he and his team devised would take several days fewer. Okay, so that seems like a detail, so we can get rid of that. Thus, lithium-ion batteries are more effective than the lithium batteries that preceded them. That's not everything that he did, so we can get rid of that. Furthermore, other researchers are experimenting with burning packing peanuts in order to use their heat to generate energy, a process known as thermal recycling. We don't want to introduce a new concept into the conclusion, so we can get rid of that. For now, Pohl and his team hope that this process will be widely adopted and will turn a ubiquitous waste product into a useful household item. Okay, so that kind of concludes everything that we talked about. So that is the answer to number 11, and that is all of passage 1. All right, so now we are on to passage 2. It looks like we're opening up with a subject-verb tense agreement question, so let's take a look. A crowd was gathered, mesmerized by the spectacle. Lloyd watched nervously until the climber, a daredevil named Bill Strother, made it safely. Okay, so he was walking when he saw, so that's past tense, a man climbing up a tall building. A crowd was gathered, that's also past tense. Mesmerized is past tense, and so Lloyd watched. So that looks like it's going to be correct. No change. At this point, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. To Lloyd, the feat showcased the way that dangerous stunts could hold an audience's attention. So let's see. That should go right here. He watched nervously until the climber, a daredevil named Strother, made it to safety. Having already made a few films in the vein of thrill comedy, the event inspired him to create his most daring film yet. Okay, so this feat showcased the way that dangerous stunts could hold an audience's attention, and then he goes into filmmaking. So yeah, it probably would be good to add that sentence. So we can get rid of C and D. Now, do we want to add it because it explains why he was nervous, or because it makes a point that is elaborated in the next sentence? Well, in the next sentence, we learn about his filmmaking career, so it's going to be B. Okay. So having already made a few films in the vein of thrill comedy, we need to ask ourselves who has already made these films, and the event is Lloyd, or the answer is Lloyd. So the event has not made films, so we can get rid of that. Lloyd did make the film, so this would be a good way to start that sentence. It is the event, so again, we can get rid of that, and then that as well. So this is a modifying question. We need to make sure that whatever has made the films is what connects to this part of the sentence. So having already made the films, Lloyd was inspired to create his most daring film yet. So that one is B. Now number 15. In the final scene of the movie, Lloyd's character, a department store worker trying to impress his girlfriend. Okay, so we have a semicolon here, and we know that that part is incomplete, so that cannot be it. Lloyd's character, a department store worker trying to impress his girlfriend. Now look, here is a dash. So that leads me to believe that this is a parenthetical phrase. And we know that they need to match. So I want to change this to a dash, but if I look at this answer, it opens with a dash, but then there's nothing here. So that one is there to trick you. It's not D. So B, these match, a comma and a comma. These do not match because that's a comma and a semicolon, so it has to be answer choice B. Number 16. He used a full-scale replica of 2 floors of LA's International Savings Building and set them on the roofs of progressively taller buildings. Okay, so he used a replica, and he placed the replica on the roof. So even though it's 2 floors, it's still one replica. So this pronoun needs to be singular, so it can't be them, or those, or these. It has to be it. So he placed it on progressively taller buildings. This is a transition. He placed the replica on a platform atop a 2-story building, then a 7-story building, and then a 13-story building. So they tell us it's progressively taller, and then they tell us specifically how he did it. So we need something that kind of illustrates that example. That does work, however does not. Furthermore, it's not an additional thing he did. They're just kind of reiterating what he has done. And then instead would also be oppositional. So we are going to keep the that is. Then a 13-story building. So this blank, whatever this is that he did, this little trick of the eye, allowed Lloyd to climb only a few stories at a time while always perpetuating the illusion that he was climbing several stories. Now, Hogue seems a little aggressive for this because he's not trying to prank people. It's not a mean thing that he's doing. It's just a trick of a way to make the trick look better. So here we do actually have the word trick. So let's hold on to that. It's not necessarily a cheat, and he's not swindling. So swindling is like usually money's involved and you're trying to trick somebody out of something. So this is just kind of a little thing that he is doing. It's just a little trick. Okay, moving on. To number 19. Which choice introduces the topic of the paragraph? So we have to read this entire paragraph. Remember to skip the underlined portion because it's only one option. So rather than using fake backdrops or projections, he insisted on a real city background. The camera angles in the climbing shots are done very precisely, cutting out the platform and the rooftop of the lower buildings, but showing the views of the streets and other buildings. In the distance. So Lloyd was not the only silent film actor to attempt such risky stunts. That has nothing to do with backgrounds or angles, so we'll get rid of that. The buildings where Lloyd filmed much of Safety Last was the top of a hill, making it seem especially tall. For publicity, Lloyd's character in Safety Last scales the side of the store where he works. That has nothing to do with backdrops. Lloyd was committed to making the stunt look as realistic as possible. So this is the idea of proper backdrops and not using illusions and using good camera angles. Okay, so the camera angles in the climbing shots are focused very precisely. So focused is a verb, very precisely is the adverb, and we know we don't need a comma between that, and so it cannot be be. The semicolon does not work either. So now we have to decide that focus very precisely, comma, cutting out the platform, or is this all one sentence? This is actually focus very precisely, comma, and then by focusing very precisely, this is what it does. So these are two different phrases, so it is going to be A. Looks like we have another diction question, so different ways of saying to attach oneself. For the long shots, Lloyd used footage that Strother filmed during his own climbs, adding to the illusion that the character really was blank to the side of a building. So clenching seems a little too like gripping with a fist, so I think we can get rid of that. He's not embracing it, it's not a hug. Clinging to would work, and then adhering to, not quite. So this idea of clinging to a building is what we're looking for. Now number 22 looks like another transition. So let's see. Each stop along the building presents perils for Lloyd's character. A mouse running up his leg, a net tangling around him, a disoriented camera flash, a flimsy clock face. All right. Lloyd does not fall from the building, but he does succeed in keeping the audience both in stitches and on the edge of their seat. So we have all these dangers, but then we learn he's safe. So to that end, this is oppositional, so we don't want it to be to that end. And then, of course, he does not fall. Okay, that could work. Otherwise, he does not fall. No. And then thus. That does not work because we learn about all these dangers. So thus, these dangers would make us think that he does fall, but we're being kind of relieved by the fact that he doesn't. So of course he does not fall. It's a movie. All right, and that is the end of passage 2. Okay, passage 3. We're going to start out with question number 23. The writer is considering deleting the underlined sentence. Should the sentence be kept or deleted? So let's start up here a little ways. Determined to bring the idea of Olympism to the modern games, Coberton incorporated into the 1912 Olympics an arts competition called the Pentathlon of the Muses. And then we have this sentence. The Olympic decathlon, a series of 10 track and field events, was also introduced in 1912. That seems a little misplaced because this whole thing is we're talking about the art pentathlon of muses. So let's delete it. It mentions information that lacks relevance. Okay, possibly. Or because it does not indicate who is responsible for introducing. No, that has nothing to do with it. So we're going to delete it because it mentions information that is not relevant to what we are currently talking about, which is the pentathlon of muses. Number 24. So remember, delete is correct 50% of the time. So let's keep that in mind as we read this. Corbetton's pentathlon, which awarded Olympic medals for achievements in architecture, literature, music, painting, and sculpture, was a part of every Olympic game until 48. Okay, the sentence ends here, and so this introductory phrase and then this complete thought, it looks like this is actually acting as a parenthetical. So Corbin's pentathlon was a part of every Olympic game until 48. So it looks like delete is going to be the correct answer here. Number 25. So we have a pattern. Prohibited from competing, prohibitive of competing, to be prohibited. So we need to know the difference between prohibited, prohibitive, and then all these like helping verbs. Regrettably, these competitions ceased due to a technicality. Professional athletes were, okay, so we need prohibited, not prohibitive, from competing in the Olympic Games. So remember, being is hardly ever the correct answer, so we can get rid of that. And they are not being prohibited to competition, they're being prohibited from competition. And then to be prohibited does not work, so this one is going to just be no change. They are prohibited from competing in the Olympic Games. Okay, number 26. Which choice provides the most effective conclusion to the paragraph? So his pentathlon was part of every Olympic event till 1948, but they ceased because professionals were not allowed to compete, and it was argued that professional artists, people who made money, should be ineligible as well. So Culberton himself won a gold medal in literature in 1912. No, that is a detail that comes out of nowhere. Some wonder whether this chapter in history deserves more attention. That also seems a little out of nowhere. Lacking eligible participants, the pentathlon of muses was discontinued. That one could work. Still, the participation of artists in the first modern Olympics was minimal. So we don't really see that it was minimal in this paragraph, so it has to be this idea that because we couldn't allow paid artists to compete, that the pentathlon of muses was discontinued. All right. So number 27, although the ban against professionals competing in athleticism has long since been rescinded, and the International Committee attempts to restore the arts competition has been tepid at best, it looks like we're not going to need a conjunction here. This is an introductory phrase, and then the complete part of the sentence starts here. So this is number 27. It looks like it's just going to be D. Number 28. So although the ban against professionals competing in athletics has long since been rescinded, the IOC's attempts to restore the arts competition has been tepid at best. So the attempts is plural, and so has been does not work. Is being, we know, is never the correct answer. And then it looks like this is kind of currently happening, so have been is going to be the best answer. Number 29. The writer wants to suggest that the sculpture was consistent with the philosophy of Olympism. Which choice accomplishes this goal? So if we remember, Olympism is this combination of artistry and athleticism. So let's take a look, keeping that in mind. Representing a Paralympic athlete triumphantly crossing the finish line, the sculpture is a small work made of bronze. That doesn't talk about the combination of athleticism and art, so we'll get rid of that. Evocatively fuses athletic and artistic achievements. Okay, there we go. Memorably reflects Linson's distinctive approach to representing human anatomy. Nope, that would be about the artist's actual sculpting style. Shows the athlete making his victory sign with his arms. Again, that has nothing to do with the combination, the whole point of Olympism. So it is B. Now, if you notice, we have these bracketed numbers, so we know that there is an ordering question coming up that we're going to have to come back to this passage for. Okay, number 30. So that's right here. However, the lack of publicity about the competition consigned Linson's work to virtual obscurity. So if you look, these all look very, very similar. This one is consigned and then relegated, so that's redundant. Consigned the sculpture by Linson, since not many people had heard about it. Nope, that's unnecessary. And then led. Led seems a little out of character for this style. I think the word consigned is definitely a better choice. So let's just keep the shortest version of that, which is the one that they've already offered us. Okay, so now we have this ordering. We're going to have to go back to that previous paragraph. We want to add the following sentence to the paragraph. However, the contest lacks prestige, funding, and publicity. Okay. So I'm going to write that right here. Lacks prestige, funding, and publicity. Okay. So although the ban against professionals competing in athleticism has long been rescinded, the IOC's attempts to restore the arts competition has been tepid at best. In 2000, the IOC instituted a sport and art contest to foster an active synergy between the worlds of art and sport. One commenter noted that the exhibition of winning entries had the feel of little more than a photo contest at the local library. Okay, so here it's them trying to do it. Here are all the things that they're doing. This might be a good place to put it because then it actually says that they are looking at the art and they are not happy with it. Take the example of Omnipotent Triumph, a 2012 prize-winning work of sculpture by U.S. artist Linson, representing a Paralympic athlete triumphantly crossing the finish line. So because the exhibition looked like it was just in a local library, even though it was quality art, that goes with this lack of prestige, funding, and publicity. So it looks like it's going to go between sentence 2 and 3. Let's see if we can find that. So placed after sentence 2. The answer is B. Okay, so now we're on number 32. If artists were to receive medals during the Olympic Games just as athletes do, and if the competitions were broadcast to the estimated 4 billion viewers turning in worldwide, talented artists such as Linson were reaching, so this is an if, so it can't be were reaching. It has to be like something futuristic or possibility. So we'll get rid of were, and then that's past tense as well. Will is a little too firm. We're looking for something that is more of a possibility. So the answer is D. They would reach if given this opportunity. All right, so now we have another diction question, number 33. Much as the Olympics athletic competitions have inspired people around the world to embrace sport and exercise, reinvigorating artistic competitions could promote enthusiasm. So do we embrace ideas or envelop, encompass, or admit? Okay, so we don't envelop ideas. We don't encompass ideas. An idea might encompass other ideas, but it doesn't work in this situation. And we're not admitting to this idea. So we're just embracing this idea of sports and exercise. So it's A. All right, and that looks like that's all for passage 3. Okay, so passage 4. We're going to start with number 34 right here. For most zookeepers, the highlight of the workday is the time they spend interacting with animals. This is a transition question, so I'm not going to read what's offered to me. They like interacting with animals. Zookeepers spend much of their time performing activities that do not involve contact with animals. So this seems like it is kind of an oppositional sentence to this one. So besides would not work for that, because besides would be like, besides, who doesn't love cuddling with koalas? So we'll get rid of that. It's not as a result, because they're talking about a completely oppositional topic. It's also not in other words, because they're not saying the same thing in a different way. It is, however, we're changing what we're talking about. They do not involve contact with animals. And so what they do is cleaning cages, preparing food. And so now we have this pattern set up. We want the gerund. So we want conducting to make sure that matches. Cleaning cages, preparing food, and conducting educational programs. Number 36. Which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? So we're right here. Most zookeepers identify closely with their profession and consider their work morally important. These findings about zookeepers are demonstrated in a study by business professors Stuart Bunderson and Jeffrey Thompson. Okay, so they did this study, and what we found is that most zookeepers identify closely with their profession and consider their work mutually important. 2 findings about zookeepers, which are that most identify closely with, no, so that doesn't work because it's telling about the findings and then what they are and then who did the study, and that's going to be too awkward. A study by business professors Bunderson and Jeffrey, a study that focused on, okay, so we're repeating the word study here, that's unnecessary. As a study by business professors J. Stuart Bunderson, and Jeffrey Thompson demonstrates, most zookeepers identify closely with their profession and consider their work morally important. Okay, that's nicely done, so let's hold on to that one. Most zookeepers found in a study by business, okay, the zookeepers are not found in this study, so we can get rid of that. It is C. Which choice most effectively uses information from the table to support a main finding of the Bunderson and Thompson study? Okay, so here's our table. These statements, agreement rates of statements about their occupation, right here. So let's start. When presented with statements asserting that their personal identity is based on their profession, such as the animal keeping profession's successes are my successes, zookeepers gave numerical responses averaging 5.21. Okay, so occupational identification, their successes are my successes, is 5.21, and that is right here. And so we probably want an answer that illustrates something from this column and then gives the number identifying. Moreover, the average response did not reach 7. Okay, so that doesn't really work. The agreement rating for statements about occupational importance was lower than that for statements about work meaningfulness. So importance to meaningfulness, that is lower, but it still doesn't follow this pattern of something from the left column and something from the right column. So I'm not going to worry about that one. Similarly, they expressed high levels of agreement with statements about their moral duty to a good job with responses of 5.49. Okay, that follows the pattern, and we're looking for moral duty and 5.49, and those work, so that's probably our answer. Let's look at D. Furthermore, their sense of duty to the zoo was only slightly greater than their willingness to sacrifice on its behalf, a difference of just 0.15. That doesn't follow our pattern, so let's stay with C. Okay, number 38. The experience of Megan Neems, a zookeeper at Capron Rock Zoo in Attleboro, Massachusetts, shows how seriously they take their job. Okay, so Neems is a zookeeper at the Cameron Park Zoo in Massachusetts, and that ends with a comma. So we probably want a comma after Neems as well, and that's going to be D. This leads her to think constantly about how she can make the animals' lives easier. Okay, so plural animals, plural lives, and that is how you pluralize the possessive there, so that works. We know it's not B because the lives don't own anything. It's not C because the lives don't own anything. The animals do own the lives, though, so it can't be D. It has to be A. No change. All right, number 40. Which choice provides accurate information from the table? The responses, which average 5.82, showed a widespread willingness to sacrifice for the job. Okay, so we're looking for job sacrifice, and we just need the number. Willingness to sacrifice is 5.52. So let's see if that's on there. 5.52 is D. Siobhan McCann, another zookeeper at Capron Park Zoo, exemplifies this disposition. Okay, and then is that just a comma, it looks like? No, I think that, yeah. She says she is comfortable working weekends and holidays to care for the zoo's animals. So how does she exemplify this position? Now, the comma doesn't work because those are two complete sentences, so we can get rid of that. She says, comma, it's not a direct quote, so this comma is incorrect, or yeah, that comma is incorrect, again here. And so it looks like D is our only option. It has a colon, but the first part of the sentence is complete, and the second part answers a question posed in that. How does she exemplify this disposition? So D works. Number 42, which choice provides the most effective transition from the previous paragraph? Okay, so this kind of talks about willingness to sacrifice in this specific example. Zookeepers perform physically demanding tasks and often accept pay that is low. So on top of interacting with the zoo's visitors, in addition to working long and unusual hours, that could work because it's sacrificing for the animals and spending more time working weekends and holidays. Though they enjoy many aspects of their jobs, zookeepers perform physically demanding tasks and often accept pay. That one doesn't as clearly connect to the previous paragraph, so I think we can get rid of it. Despite working with many types of animals, the zookeepers perform physically. No, that doesn't connect to the previous paragraph either, so it has to be B. It's the only one that connects to this idea of working long and unusual hours, such as weekends and holidays. Accept pay that is low relative to their educational achievements, which is most consistent with the style of the passage as a whole. It is low relative to their educational achievement, so we can hold on to that one. Is low even when they are most higher educated. That doesn't work. It doesn't fit the writing style. Despite their having a whole bunch of education, when compared with their attainment of an educational nature. No. So this is the cleanest, most concise way to say that. Yet for many, a love of animals and a commitment to animal conservation is making these sacrifices not just tolerable, but meaningful. Okay, so what is making these sacrifices meaningful? It is the love and the commitment. So because it is two things, that is plural, and so we don't want an S at the end of our verb, so this is just going to be make. They make it meaningful. Okay, so if you can, because this is plural, you can replace it with they, and then they make the sacrifices meaningful. Sounds nicer and is grammatically correct. All right, so that is the rest of passage 4, and that is it for the writing section.